final video, we're going to be completing the actual art journal page. If you haven't watched videos 1 and 2, you may want to do that so you understand how to get the hybrid art supplies. Once again, I am a member of the creative team from O-Scraps, and I am using a kit available there. You can find the kit by Angie Young Designs, it's called Begin Again, as part of the O-Scraps store, as well as other products by Angie Young. Okay, so this is my art journal. It's actually a magazine. I'm doing some altered magazines this year, and I'll share how I create those and prep those in another video. For this particular page, what I have done is I chose this magazine page because I liked this design, and I've taken some gesso and covered over the parts of the page. This was an ad, and I've covered over the parts that I don't want. I chose this particular page because it has some of the colors that are available in the digital kit that I'm using. It has like the pinks and the oranges. So my color palette is sort of preset. That's the nice thing about using a digital kit. It gives you a preset color palette to work with. I've got reds, purples, greens, orange, and then I've got some of this more pink color here, and black and kind of the brown tones in some of these papers. So what I want to do in order to make this mesh with this side of the page, I need to pull some of these colors over. This page here, I have taken a scrap piece of junk mail and covered up the other magazine page, and I've put a little bit of gesso on the page as well. And I don't know if you can see it in the texture, but some of the little bits from when I was doing the weeding from the doily, I've scattered it on here, and if it dries into it, that's great. It gives a little bit of texture. If not, no big deal. So anyway, I need to pull this design over here a little bit. So these are watercolor crayons, and I've got just a few of them. They're by Neocolor. I have a few of them from the set in the colors from the page here. And I'm just going to try to make some geometric shapes. And I find when I use these, I'm going to use, this is a water brush. I'm just going to use these to add the color to the page. I find that when I use these, it's best to do one color at a time because it's harder to activate that crayon if it dries on the page a little bit, for whatever reason, at least in my opinion. That's what I do. So I'm just kind of moving it around, and I'll need this to dry in between this and the next stage. So I'm just kind of pulling some random shapes and colors similar to what was used on the other page. And it doesn't have to be exact, but I just feel like it has to somehow kind of coordinate in with the rest of the page. I probably won't go all the way across. I just want the design to partially come over a little bit. These are pretty close, so it might not look too different there. It's okay. You don't want to color too hard with it. Sometimes you can. It depends on how you want to shade it, but and I'm just going to try to make it look like these shapes are just partially coming onto this page. This will give me a second pattern because the pattern that I chose from the digital kit is striped. So this will just give me an additional pattern there. I think this is about all I will need to do. I just absolutely love these water brushes. They just make watercolor so easy. So I've got that started. Now, let's see, I think I want one more there. And there's a little bit of wet gesso there still. Probably one of the most difficult things for me, I think I said it a minute ago, is to wait for stuff to dry in between. I'm just gonna I keep baby wipes on my desk so I can wipe my brushes and wipe my hands. Okay, so this is going to have to dry, but I can start adding in some of the other elements while I wait. And I want to try to plan out the design. So I've got this one with the birds here, and then I've got these birds that could probably come across the page here. And this will just sort of frame the page a little bit. Now this particular one, when I cut it out, I don't know how well you can see it here, there's a little bit of a dot. There were some extra paint splatters that if I really wanted to, I could punch them out of the paper. The silhouette did cut them, but I'm not going to worry a whole lot about that. I can add in extra splatters later. So this is gel medium, and I'm going to use this to kind of glue this down. One thing to keep in mind when you're working with printed items is that you may get a little bit of color run. The ink is going to run a little bit. It can make a nice artistic effect, and it's going to, whether you get that is going to depend on the type of printer, the type of paper, the type of ink. So you probably don't want to cover your entire image in gel medium or other wet items like watercolors if you're too worried about it running a whole lot. Doesn't look like I'm getting a whole lot of fade, but a little bit. Let's just put a little bit here on this one. And the nice thing about doing art journaling with the hybrid items is if something does happen to rip, if it's very detailed, it's not a big deal. You can just add it back into the page later. So now I've got that started. I want to start layering some stuff in. Actually, let's see. Probably should have layered a couple of these in first, but this is still wet, so I'm just going to slide this into here. And let's see. This can come right across the page here. If you don't want to use gel medium all the time, you can also use just regular scrapbooking adhesive. And other things that I will do as I'm layering, I'll look for areas where, and you probably can't see it, but I can see a little bit of the ad underneath, and I'll just cover those up. With some of these die cuts and with other paint. I'll kind of make it a point that that's where my design is going to go. So I know I'm going to do something with these two ladies on the page. I'm not sure what yet. I've got a couple other bits here. These were just on my desk. They're left over from another project. And they're kind of a purpley blue and a gray, and I could sort of use them as well. So I'm just going to break them into here. I try to do things in groups of 3. So let's try to move this up here a little bit. And I've got a little bit of this here. Just kind of layer this in, come back in with the gel medium. Just sort of layer that into place. Now with the magazine, ripping that onto there, it's not a big deal. It won't bleed. just sort of start our collage going. Okay, and I know the ladies are going to be somewhere in this area, so I'm going to go ahead and lay out the word phrase up here. Okay. You can kind of just put a little bit underneath to get that started getting into place there. Now with this, I lost a few of the little dots for the eyes. They're very tiny, and some of them I have, some of them are gone. I'm going to come back in with a black pen or a black marker and just add those dots back in, so it's not such a big deal. The thing is too, if you don't get it in place exactly while the gel medium is wet, you can kind of move stuff around a little bit. And I actually think this one goes down here. There we go. Now, of course, once it's dry, you won't be able to move everything around. So, now my fingers are sticky. I'm going to just wipe them a little bit and then come back in and finish putting these down. You can see there's a little bit of a gray bleed around it. It's not too bad. Okay, so now that part needs to dry, and I need to decide if I'm going to do anything with the rest of it. I do want to collage in some of this paper too, so let's go ahead and start that. I'm just going to rip off. Most of what I want to use has the color because I'm going to put gesso into it. So I'm not going to use this white part in the center. I'm going to try to keep it to just the 3 clustered sections here. It's already a little too dry. Sometimes you have to work pretty quickly. There we go. Just do that. I think I'll rip a little bit of that off to balance that out a little bit more. There we go. I'll just put the little bit here. Again, I'm not too concerned whether or not I'm going to get bleed. It's totally up to you if you're worried about that or not. And that'll just kind of seal this onto the page. If you want to, you can leave some of the edges folded up a little bit for a little more texture. Okay, so that's going to need to dry. And I think the next step is going to add a little bit of maybe some color or texture paste. So I'm at the next stage where I want to add the next layer of gesso and maybe a little bit of paint. Again, I'm using the colors from the kit to dictate the paint colors, and this is just a little acrylic paint in a sort of pinkish purple color, a purple, an orange, and a red. I can spread that out over the page. I can also use the leftover cuts from the silhouette as a sort of stencil. I've got the small circles, I've got larger circles, I have the flower shapes, I have the butterfly shapes. I also have some of the words from this here. I can also use the die cuts themselves. I can reverse them and do sort of a reverse with the silhouette. So let's see what that would look like. I'm going to actually use a little bit of white gesso around it, just a tiny bit on my finger. You can also use a brush if you want to. And I'm just going to kind of rub that around the butterfly. It came up, so that's okay. So I've got a partial butterfly shape. Just kind of rub this off so I can still use it. And I'll let that dry. And I think I'm actually going to come in with the words I am over the top. Do that in some purple. A little bit wet, but I can go back with a black pen or a marker after and kind of clean that up a little bit. Remember, this is all an experiment. Just be brave and see what happens. So let's play around a little bit with some shapes here. I'm going to take this butterfly and I think I'm going to do the same thing here with the gesso, just a little bit gently around the shape. I've still got a little bit of purple on my finger, so that'll show up. And just bring that off, and I'm going to just gently clean some of that off the die cut. But it's okay if the die cut gets a little messy because we're going to be using that on the page. I think I will add a couple more shapes in and around here with some of the different colors. And it can be just kind of messy. It doesn't have to be, you know, perfect. You're just sort of layering in. And I want that to be kind of uneven. So I'm going to just let that run off kind of like it's a partial bit. Let's add another one over here. And I'm letting the colors kind of blend in a little bit. Remember, this is just the next layer. And maybe a couple more up here. And again, if it's messy, it's fine. I think one more set of these right up here, just 3 this time, not 4. There we go. And I'll put a couple. It bothers me that it's not kind of even in here. So just blend this in. And I'm going to take a little bit of the gesso and put it in here. blending that over the other. Okay, let's do, so we've got kind of this burst kind of pattern coming off of here, and we lost it a little bit. I'm just going to lean this over the top and just come back in and kind of do that just a little bit. Again, if it's not perfect, it's okay. And it's okay that the paint is wet because it'll all just kind of blend in a little bit, making these kind of interesting paint splatters. Let's clean my hands a second before I move on to the next part. I think I want to add a few more of these butterflies too, though. I'm gonna do one in white here. A little bit of the purple got in there, that's okay. And I like to do things in threes, so I'll just put them on again. Okay. And there's still some paint on the stencil, so I just kind of pulling it in a little bit. There we go. So I think this layer will need to dry, and then we can move on to the next stage. I had thought about using the doily on here, and I think I might add part of it here. So let me clean my hand a second and find out where I stuck my scissors. Here we go. You don't have to leave things whole. You can cut them apart. There's no rule that says you have to leave them whole. Let's just do this to get it down, and I can come back in with the medium and add back to it if I need to. See, I think this will work here because it's more of a diagonal. I think that's about enough of that particular one. And I want to layer in a few of these dots in as well, I think. Here, here, maybe one there. Again, you don't have to leave them whole. So this one I'm going to just cut in half, which means I can take this one and place it over here someplace. There we go. Actually, I like him lower down here. So I've just got my 3 clusters on the sides that I keep building up into each other. So I think I'm going to have to let this dry before the next stage. I think I also want to use this somewhere on here. So this is just a leftover dry cleaning tag that my husband had on his clothes. I just want to find a place that it might work. I think I liked it up here. just add that in. So this is all about layering. So again, the next stage will kind of have to dry a little bit. I think I can stick a couple other items on here. So I'm going to use her, and I'm going to give her some wings. Let's give her the more colorful wings. I'm going to cut the butterfly in half and give her the wings. And then I've got her as well, and she's gonna need some wings. I think the placement works okay, but I think I'm gonna do a larger face here. So let's move her up a little bit. Let's put her up here. Maybe here. This works better for me. And I think I'll come back in after some of this is dry, after I'm finished painting, and put some of the buttons in to finish it in place. Just get these anchored down. Go. So that's got a nice continuation, but there maybe should be one more butterfly here and here to try to make it go and flow across the page. So let's just add in nice, let's do a pink one. We can do the smaller one too. There's a nice pink butterfly shape, and we'll do one more up here. We'll make this one more orange. I'm probably putting the paint on a little too heavy because it's squishing out, but that's okay. It gives me the basic butterfly shape that I want. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll finish the final stage. Okay, so I kind of cheated a little bit while it was drying off screen. I had some leftover paint in the palette, and I hate wasting paint. So I painted a couple of triangles around on the page. Triangles are a symbol of change, and they kind of go with this whole idea of not giving up, starting over to something new. And you've got the butterfly, which also can represent a metamorphosis. So I added the triangles. I took the rest of the paint and I just randomly put it on this page, and I took a brayer. See, here's the brayer, and I just rolled the paint around on it. This will not stay like this. I'll probably paint over it and do some other collage, but it's sort of just a beginning for whatever this is going to be on that art journal. I also had this yellow glitter tape on the desk, and I couldn't resist adding just some torn bits here and there on the page. I added in some flowers, and now I'm looking at adding in the buttons. This is still drying a little bit more before I can use my black pen or my paint pen on it. So I'm going to mess with the buttons a little bit. And I've just got some standard embroidery floss, and I'm going to go ahead and just sort of floss these buttons a little bit. Now, you don't need a lot because they're going to be glued down, just enough to sort of hang on there. I'm looking to put them on the page in places where I can sort of anchor it. So like right here, I can anchor the tape to this cluster. Just put a little bit here. Now I am going to go ahead after I use that little drop and use the glossy accents over the top to give it dimension. I don't usually put a whole lot of dimension on my art journal pages because I want them to lay flat, but if I use buttons, I do like them to be dimensional. I use the glossy accents as well on my scrapbook pages. There is also Judican's Diamond Glaze, which is similar. It's also a dimensional adhesive. This isn't bad stuff either. The only problem that I have is that it takes longer to dry than the glossy accents. So you're just going to take your glossy accents and put a little bit on. You don't need a heavy layer. Just very lightly glaze it, and it's going to turn it into a slightly raised enamel bit. There we go. And it'll be sort of a milky color. I don't know if you can see that on the video. It'll have a milky color and it will dry clear. Also going to do the same thing with the other buttons. I'll do the big button first. So I'll probably have to break the floss strand down a little lower. Less strands for the other button. The only key with the glossy accents is giving it enough time to dry and not putting your hands in it. So we'll just pull this through, do this, cut it free. And I liked this one down here. A little bit of glue. And we'll add a little dimension. And just kind of push it around with the tip so it's a thinner layer. I don't need it to be very thick. The thicker you make it, the more time it's going to take to dry. So I'm just going to then floss the other buttons. But I don't need as thick of a strand. Looks like I forgot to weed this one completely, so just poke the holes there. I could also have it on a needle, but I don't. And with this one, I'm just going to let the strand hang a little bit so that it kind of flaps off to the side here. Let's kind of anchor these pieces together. There we go, and we got one more button right here that I want to do. Then you could definitely call this page done if you wanted to. There's a couple more things that I would like to do to it before it's finished. I want to highlight some of those butterflies and words with my marker. This one's being difficult, he doesn't want to go through. There we go. Again, I'm just going to let some of this hang off a little bit here. That way, get a little bit more texture. And to mention, this bottle of glossy accents is almost done. There we go. Okay, so I've got that part done. Now, logic dictates I should probably be careful and let that dry a little bit more. Oh, here it is. But I'm going to start playing around with this marker. This is a Posca paint marker. It's very fine tipped. You could also use like a gel pen, and I'm just going to come here and I'm going to sort of outline the edge of that butterfly and the words I am. And I'm just going to kind of outline all these little butterflies that are very pale here. Trying to be careful and not getting my hands in the glossy accents while I do that. Okay, I'll just kind of pick the book up and rotate it a little bit here. Kind of give this butterfly a little bit of a body. Give them a little bit of a design because my pen kind of messed up a little bit. So we'll just go with it. Whoops. Kind of made that come out too fast. I think I drew over a wet part and it kind of was clogging it a little bit. Then I unclogged it. Do the same thing here. We're kind of messed up the outline of the butterfly, so I'll give it an entire body. There we go. And then we've got one more right here. You have to be careful, like that was still a little wet. And I've been impatient, so my pen is not working as well as I would like it to. So this side, the butterflies are going to be a little more detailed than the other side. I think I hear my cat outside the door. Hope you're not hearing it on the video. There we go. And I'll put the lid on that. A couple of these spots, I think, need a little more filling, so I'm going to use a thicker tip. Just dab these in a little bit. And I probably just want to add a few more details. I'm thinking I might also add a lady right here, but I'm debating about that. We'll see. So one of the last things I want to do before I decide whether or not to add another face of my own drawing to it, I want to do some paint splattering. So I put a little bit of acrylic paint here. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to water it down. I just dripped it out of my water brush, and I've got an acrylic brush. I don't want to use the water brush with the acrylic. And I'm just going to take that watered down paint and I'm going to just kind of flick it. There we go. And that can dry the way it is, and again I'll decide whether or not I want to add anything else or whether I'm finished. Don't forget, there are 2 more videos in this series. You'll find the links to those in the notes for this video. You'll also want to hop over to the O Scraps blog to check out the complete article.